Hello there my friends, welcome to my another video. Last week we finished building this tiny FV432 in 1:72 scale, and in today's video I've decided I'm going to make a tiny display vignette for this tiny model. It's not going to be anything special, just a diorama to display your model in a more interesting way than on an empty shelf. So grab a drink or a snack, make yourself comfortable, and let's start working on this tiny diorama. I start by cutting the general shape into my styrofoam block. I cut the shape using a hobby knife. You don't have to be very precise with this, it's going to be mostly covered at the end, but it's going to give you a nice idea of what you want. However, be very careful, the hobby knife or any other knife that you are going to use is prone to jumping off the styrofoam, and it's very sharp. I went with a generic shape of a little stream on the right side of the diorama, and then a road basically running down the middle. Nothing special. I was kind of planning to make a tree for the diorama as well, but that hadn't worked out too well for me. Hopefully the next diorama will finally have a nice looking tree, but for now only a little road. Once the shape is cut, you could make it smoother with a blowtorch, but I didn't do that. I started working on the groundwork. Now, first I put some PVA glue down onto the base and I spread it around. Now, this is when I found out I didn't have enough PVA glue, so I had to go buy a new one, but what I had left was enough to cover the entire base. I used my old brush for that. And then I use a ordinary air drying clay to model the groundwork. The PVA glue that I spread all over it is going to make the air drying clay a lot softer, which is going to make it way easier to manipulate around the area. And it'll also glue the air drying clay to the ground nicely, because it doesn't really want to stick to a soft surface of a styrofoam. I had a comment saying that I should probably mix the clay with the PVA glue before I even start spreading it around the base, but as I've mentioned, I ran out of PVA glue, so that was unfortunately not possible, but I may try it in my future dioramas if I find it to be a good idea. I spread the air drying clay all around the diorama using my finger, which makes it a little dirty, but that's not too much of an issue. And I try to sculpt in some of the roots. I also sculpted in like overhangs over the little stream that I noticed in the reference pictures, and then using an old piece of track I put in some track texture, because a tank is going to go through that area. Now that it had dry, I am going to use a vehicle vignette to basically give even more texture to the diorama. This is an acrylic product, so it's very easy to wash off your brush, and it's easily spreadable, easily blendable, and also it dries really quickly. And it looks like real mud, trust me, I spilled it on my clothes and now I can't get a mud stain off of my clothes, so be careful with that. I suppose if you would buy some more of this terrain paste, or you would buy a thicker one, you could skip the air drying clay step and use this for the groundwork instead. I know there are pastes that are basically made for that, but I didn't get my hands on one yet, but I would love to. By this time I actually purchased a new PVA glue, so I used it for some pebbles on the diorama. What I did was basically I just put a drop of PVA glue where I wanted, and then I spread it around using a damp brush, which diluted it and made it easier to spread around. And then I just sprinkled on some rocks. You could even spread on some sand. I just didn't get my hands on sand either. I have a lot of things I need to buy for my dioramas before going further with them, I suppose. Once this had dried, I finally started painting the base. I used flat brown. Now this is different brown that I've used up until now, but I think it's a better shade of brown, mainly for groundwork, so I am really happy with the result. I dilute the paint using ordinary water, so it's easier to paint on. I paint basically everything with it, making sure that I don't cover all of the original like texture paint, because that also has quite a nice brown color, and it just makes the diorama have more colors, which is always good. Then using some buff, I again put it into the wet brown. It was still wet, and I wet blended it around. This is a very nice technique that brings pretty nice effects for my diorama, and I think you could use this on a model as well. I think I've seen Plasmo do it, I'm not sure, but it's kind of not the easiest to control, and for a model you need several coats, not just one, so I'm not sure how that would work, but perhaps I will try it sometime in the future to see if it's usable for a scale model and not just a groundwork. Now this is the layer I left to dry, and then I tried, as you can see over here, I tried some to see how the cursed turf from Woodland Scenics I recently purchased works, and it worked pretty well, so I went on with the diorama. What I did here was I used the buff color again to dry brush it onto the base, just to pick out some of the tiny little details that are hidden if you don't look closely enough. And then I started adding some more vegetation. Now for this I used again PVA glue. Usually in the past I would spread the PVA glue basically everywhere, drop grass on it, remove the excess grass and call it a day. But here I wanted to try doing something more interesting, so as you can see I put the PVA glue into sort of clumps, and then into those clumps I put different types of different types of vegetation. Here you can see me using the coarse turf from Woodland Scenics again, and yeah, I just spread the little dots around, put some Woodland Scenics coarse turf, also some different type of vegetation, because what you need for a diorama is diversity and asymmetry, because that's how the world works. And for the longer dried grass, or it doesn't need to be dried grass, but for the longer grass I actually used an old brush. I took it and I cut off the bristles, and then I glued them onto the model in clumps of a few, and that basically made a very nice looking vegetation. It's actually not an old brush, I bought a completely new one. It was just really cheap, so I bought it specifically for this, and one brush is going to last you like forever. And here, as you can see, the Woodland Scenic as well. This is actually used for bushes and trees, as I mentioned. Hopefully it also soaks up paint, so I can paint it on my next diorama. But that's maybe a little bit of a spoiler. The last effect I wanted to do was the little stream itself. Now for water, you would use usually, you know, resin water made by Emo or whoever, but I don't trust myself to work with such a dangerous material, and I don't know how I would actually go on with it. Of course, in the future, once I get more space for it and I guess more followers, I don't know, I will try using resin water, but here I tried actually using vehicle splashman, because I noticed that if I applied it incorrectly, it dried into a glossy finish. So I thought, what if I just applied incorrectly in really big amounts and then let it dry, and it actually came out looking like a pretty nice, very muddy stream. So I'm really happy with the result, and I really hope that the techniques in today's video really helped you. Again, this isn't supposed to be a competition-winning diorama, it's supposed to be a diorama that displays your model in a more interesting way than just putting it on a shelf. So I hope you found these techniques interesting. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing or giving me a like, perhaps commenting if you'd like to support me financially. You have my Patreon down in the description. Thank you for watching,